Hi Hayley, hi John. Just thought I'd do you a video to explain the initial concept sketches that I've done for you. So I'm kind of all finished and ready to show you, and I wanted to just kind of talk it through with you. And I think doing a video, you get a chance to kind of watch it a few times and discuss it amongst yourselves before you get back to me with sort of any feedback and comments. So it works quite well, really. So here we are in your garden, and obviously one of the things that I was really keen to bear in mind is all these different kind of angles that we've got going on. It's quite an interesting shape because we've got the garage coming in at a sort of peculiar angle into the garden, and then obviously a raised bit, and also the angle of the fence. And the reason I'm sort of going through that now, I just want to show you the dimensions kind of drawn out here. When you actually plot it on paper, it's quite, the angles are actually kind of quite severe because we took the measurements from this corner here, didn't we? You helped me with that, Hayley, so I sort of went across corner to corner. So I'm pretty sure that this is pretty accurate. And once you kind of see it laid out on paper, you really see how complex sort of shapes we've got going on. This little bit of fence is slightly angled in, then it straightens up. And then the big thing here for me is how much the sort of garage comes into the garden. So what I always start doing is start sketching out basic shapes and geometry just to make sure all the proportions kind of work in the space. And what was really throwing me was the kind of straight lines coming out from the house, and I did a few concepts and I kept coming to the way this kind of angled into the garden, and I actually decided pretty early on that I was going to use this to my advantage. I kept trying to hide it and hide these angles, and pretty much from the start I've made a design decision even to actually put the whole garden at an angle, and it really helps so much to open up the space. What happens here is with the straight lines going perpendicular to the house, everything feels closed off and the angles feel awkward. But as soon as I came off this line and came at 90 degrees then from this line from the back of the garage, it was like a light bulb moment, and everything sort of worked well, and the whole space was opened up more, and I could just make so much more of the space in what's a really quite a small garden, and we're trying to jam pack a lot in. It kind of really worked for me, so this is why I wanted to kind of talk through it, and I've given you two options, and I want to sort of talk you through what I've done. So without further ado, let's find my little sketches for option one, and I'll just show you that. That's a little overall kind of layout perspective sketch, and then let's perhaps look at the plan drawing to start with. Let's get rid of this one a minute. Okay, let's bring this one over and let's have a look at this. Right, okay, so I'll just let you sort of take that in for a minute. Hopefully it kind of makes sense what I was trying to explain very badly a minute ago. What I've done, as you can see, is this angle from the garage wall I've used to my advantage, and I've actually kind of skewed the whole garden layout to follow that angle, and suddenly the whole garden just opens up and across into this corner, and it all just fits beautifully, and this angle doesn't look awkward anymore. It looks like it's meant to be there, and the whole design flows from it. And as soon as I did that, I managed to get so much more into your space. So this first option, as you can see, option one, is actually keeping the existing boundary. So it's a kind of save cost option, because what I really want to do is create this kind of mood and feel that you want without blowing the budget. And I am very conscious that it is a very tight budget. So what I'm a little bit worried about doing is moving this fence out and spending quite a chunk of the budget on moving that boundary before we've even got any of the beautiful features and things that I want to do in the garden. So I thought I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I didn't at least look at designing the space how it is now to see what I could do with it. And I actually feel that it works really well, and that in my mind, quite honestly, I think your money will be better spent actually creating these features and these beautiful things going on here, rather than gaining a sort of metre of space here that's going to be quite costly. So I'll leave that with you because I know it's a big thing, and I have got the second option to show you where I have increased the boundary. So that's the first thing to mention. The second thing is obviously that I've skewed everything on the sort of 45 degrees, and what that does is allows me to open up this space. So everything sort of from your doors is kind of drawing you out to the corners, and it's just pushing those boundaries out visually. So the whole garden's going to look so much bigger doing it this way. If we do everything perpendicular and straight off the house, it suddenly looks like this cuts into the garden and this cuts into the garden. And by cleverly, she says, giving herself a pat on the back, by skewing it this way, it doesn't look like awkward angles, if that makes sense. So what have we got? We've got a step down. We've got a little bit of new paving here. I suggest we go for a sandstone paving, quite low budget. Not a high-end porcelain or anything. It opens up the space here for a small table and chairs in this corner, and then it gives us enough space to have a beautiful rectangle of artificial lawn here, perfectly enough, big enough to sort of play on and have games and things and picnics with teddy bears or whatever. So that is still a nice kind of open green space. What I want to do is surround it by planting. So rather than having paving all the way around, I've got a little opening here, rectangle of herb planting here, and then it creates this lovely kind of shape here from the fence that we plant up against here. And as soon as this is planted in this area against that existing fence boundary line, that whole weird angle is just disappears because the planting just hides it all, and all we've got instead is lovely straight lines, squares and rectangles basically. The main thing with both of my designs is that I really want to make the step access to the raised terrace part of the garden. And what I mean by that is, if we just go back to the picture as it is now, currently the raised area feels very, very separated from the lower terraces and the grass, and that's partly because of this balustrade here, which just is a visual boundary cut-off point, and obviously it was needed there to stop people falling off the raised deck because you've just got small narrow steps here. But you know, you can sort of see clearly that it just makes this terrace seem so tight and tiny and this small, and it's all just sort of cut off space. What I want to do is open that up so that we have big wide steps wrapping around the raised terrace, and what that does is it makes the whole raised bit all integral to the design, and you can sit on these, have little lights set into them, you can place pots on them, and it all just becomes part of the garden rather than balustraded off. I'm going to get my little sketch up here because I think it will help to see now how I sort of visualise it. So here you go, you can see the sort of 3 steps up to the raised platform, and it's just, you know, you would go out there and pop a cushion on here when you've got people around, because this is a small terrace. Let's not shy away from the fact that this is a small dining space. As soon as those steps become part of it, you can imagine, you know, you can sit here, somebody's having a glass of wine, somebody's sitting on a bench over here, you can have 3 or 4 people sitting on the steps, so it becomes all part and parcel of the garden. We've still got plenty of seating around. So this area in the corner is a raised rendered bed. So it just sits neatly across the garden there. And what I'm suggesting is a little floating bench going across. So this is all built in with a timber bench area going across. And then we've still got room for your existing freestanding bench and a nice raised pond area for your lovely pond to sort of, you know, have a new home. So let's go back to the overhead plan. Here's the raised rendered bed with a floating seat across it, all beautifully planted in here, and then a raised pond. This again can be rendered, or it could be a sleeper bed. But this can all be part of the same sort of structure. If it's rendered, it just becomes part and parcel of that same structure, and we can play with levels here, and we can have 2 different levels. And then there's a lovely area here, a little seating area that's just cut away here with a smaller unit. The paving, I think we should use, as I said, sort of sandstone paving, but a very contemporary one, like a smooth honed one, and using all the same size paving, like rectangular, laid in a linear kind of pattern, is a very modern feel, and it looks beautiful mixed with a much smaller set, like 100 by 100 small unit. Let me show you that on a mood board that I've done for you. Here we go. This is just to show you what I have in mind for sort of some of the materials. So yeah, I've mixed and matched big paving unit with a smaller sandstone set, and that's exactly what you see here. So here's the bigger sort of grey perhaps, or you could have buff tones, but it's got a smooth sandstone, all the same rectangular size, but what looks lovely is mixed in with a smaller set square, and that just creates a bit of interest and intrigue, a little bit of designer detail. Here we've got very handily quite a good representation of what the raised bed would be, with a kind of bench across, although this one's not floating, it's filled in. This one here is a kind of floating bench, which gives a much more illusion of space, because you can create more space underneath, which is great. Floating benches in a small garden really help, because it just makes the floor space look so much bigger. What else? So there's an option here. The reason this one's got deck on it as well is there is an option of, where are we? Let's go back. So in the drawing here, I've drawn this one out as a decking terrace. So obviously in the plan I've got sandstone and a sandstone terrace raised, with a small set going around, but there's no reason why we couldn't do 3 different materials. So depending on cost and what's feasible and what your personal preference is, we can build these wide shallow steps in, you know, we can make a new deck and have deck steps with lights in, or they can be stone steps and terracing. Now I've drawn in there, because it looks nice, a nice sofa set, some beautiful kind of big rectangular tubs, and some lovely lighting sort of strung across. Obviously it's all measured out that for the time being the Wendy house will still be just sitting on there, and there's plenty of room. I've measured that, and that all fits in there nicely. Let me just pull that across there, and yeah, let's go back to the layout. So in the layout you can see here there's like a little dotted line, and that represents the Wendy house that will currently sit on there. So even when the Wendy house is still up and still in use, there's a little bit of room around it, but I've kind of sketched over top where a bit of furniture could go, and a fire pit, etc, etc. So that is the first option. I'll keep that to one side, and let's go to option 2. And to see, I want to sort of show you what difference it makes having the boundary moved. So here we go. Okay, so this one is, as you can see, moving the existing boundary down that kind of metre or so, and having it straight across and sort of extending this boundary line here. Now, for the sake of doing that, it frees up more space here, but obviously then we need a gate access coming in at a sort of different angle. So I've just played with the design, I think, still putting it on the 45 degrees, still with these big wide steps and with the raised bed here and floating bench. But what it's allowed me to do is create a bit more of a journey around the garden with a pathway to the end here, and I've actually put the raised pond area alongside the deck. And what's nice about this is as you go up the steps, you would have a kind of different view of the pond, if you like. You can sort of get up and close to it, and you can get higher. Let me just show you that on a sketch because I think it's clearer. So here, by having this pond height here, I'd still have the raised bed behind it with planting at a slightly higher point. In fact, I think I'd have the pond around 45 centimetres, which is seat height. So I've put the bench here kind of pretty much in line. But as you can see, you could sort of go up to the steps. Whether that makes it more dangerous, that you could have a little fall in, I don't know. But I just thought you could sort of sit and perch on the side and have a look in. So that kind of allows me more space to put that over there. And it also gave me more space to give the whole design a bit more definition. So what I've put in here is a little planting hedge. I love little box hedging in contemporary gardens as well as country cottage gardens. In a contemporary setting, they just give that clean sort of crisp edge to a design, and it just kind of really frames it. So I don't think it's wasted space at all. I think it just gives us room to play with that and bring a little bit more greenery into the garden with clear clipped box hedging, and then planting along the boundary and a little pathway through. So let me show you the overhead again. So here we are. So that's what moving the boundary could do for us. I still wouldn't necessarily pave all the way up and to the new gate. I think it's nice to have a little bit of cutout of planting just to soften it a little bit. So I've come out here with a little bit of planting area here. So you would step down, step onto this paving, around and down the pathway, or of course straight across the artificial lawn. So it just gives another little journey. Whether it gives us any more in terms of design, in terms of budget, I'm not sure, and this is why I wanted to explore the option of keeping the boundary exactly where it is. I think perhaps your decision may well come down to cost. If we were to keep the existing boundary, you know, there's a lot that could be done just with the existing fencing. So I'm looking at some of the pictures here of your garden, and okay, it's in a little bit of disrepair perhaps, but nothing that couldn't just be fixed with a few new boards. And I think a good coat of paint, perhaps even the same colour as your front door, that kind of colour, by the time we've then got a beautiful raised rendered walling, inbuilt bench, beautiful paving material and beautiful steps going down, this kind of panel will almost be kind of hidden anyway up to here, and then there's going to be planting on top. So we're going to have a little bit of sort of planting coming into this corner of the garden on top of the raised, you know, in the raised bed. And I can see a little bit of sort of foliage quite tall here in the corner. And then by the time you've got sort of a lovely pond area and a bench in front, really this just becomes the backdrop. I know you're really, really keen to do the cedar slat kind of effect fencing. It is extraordinarily expensive. So, you know, if we've got 10 grand for the garden build and we spend two fixing a fence and replacing it and moving it, then that brings us down. Obviously it's quite a big chunk, and then I'm not sure if what I've done is achievable. So I just really want to try and stretch the budget as much as possible and just give that option for you to think about. It does look lovely having the cedar slats, but then again, you know, just a clean painted fence when there's so much interest in the garden. I chose all these images because there was a floating bench, the raised bed. We could always build the raised bed in timber like this one with lovely grasses and greenery behind. I chose this image because it was just the clean cut, simple lines and simple topiary that I really liked, and I think we could achieve this kind of look and this look with just the clean box hedging going around crisp lawn. Alternatively, if you wanted something a bit more billowy, this is quite an evergreen kind of planting scheme, but it's really equally as lovely against a sort of grey deck there. This one here, this is actually a composite decking, which I think would be too expensive for our budget, but I wanted to show you the colours. That we could just do a softwood deck and paint it, stain it this kind of colour, and we could get this kind of effect with the little lights going through. Alternatively, we could build out of new railway sleepers, which this one is, with a pond, which is very cost effective. I know it looks a little bit rustic there, but once it's up against clean contemporary planting and clean contemporary sort of smooth paving, sleepers actually can look quite modern as well, and they can always be painted. So I've had quite a bit of success actually painting sleepers dark grey or even black, and they come up pretty special. So all sorts of options there. I'm going to leave it with you. I think what I'll do is send you still images of these so that you can have a look, really think through, and come back to me with your thoughts on which one you want to go with, and I'll get that drawn up properly for you. If there's any amends or changes, obviously, then, you know, just mark them on. You can print one of these out and even make some suggestions, or, you know, draw on it with red pen or something is often quite a good way of doing it. Okay, so I hope that helps, and I'll catch up with you soon. Okay, bye for now. Bye.